everybody. This is Yin Yoga, and if you're watching this online or you're relatively new to this yoga practice, it is a very slow, mindful practice. So there's an opportunity with every pose to practice staying present and to practice bringing yourself back to presence. There's also an opportunity in every pose to mind trip. It's kind of the opposite of those things. So if you catch yourself, like, you know, mentally going through your grocery list or thinking about stuff you gotta do later or whatever the things are that your brain does when you're not paying attention, when you catch yourself doing that, just come back to the pose, and you wanna pay attention to how the pose feels, how the breath impacts the pose. Are the sensations kind of getting softer? If the sensation gets softer, then you can adjust to bring yourself back to a place where you feel something. If the sensation is creating tension in your body, you want to become aware of that. So you can notice if you're, you know, for some reason crinkling up your brow or tightening up through the jaw, so that you can remain relatively relaxed as you can be under the current set of circumstances. But as much as possible, we're going to try to stay present with the kind of, like, the sensation that is usually referred to as the edge. And what that means is that we feel something happening. It doesn't mean I'm at the point where I almost can't stand it anymore. That's past the edge. And almost always your nervous system will tense up your body if you're in that stage. So we want to find the place where everything relaxes into the intensity of the pose itself. Now, some people won't feel as much intensity as others. We're all unique in the way our bodies are structured and how much flexibility that we have, or how much range of motion we have in the joints. And so you're just going to take this pose by pose based on how it feels to you. And if you did a whole practice and you didn't really feel that much, but you breathe deep, you relax tension out of your body, you stay present with your mind as much as possible, you've still done a yoga practice, and likely you'll feel really good at the end of all that. So we're going to start with a reclining butterfly, and during this time, I love this all the time, but especially during times of higher stress and anxiety, there's a tendency for the body to want to protect itself. And so the shoulders will often roll forward, will often hollow a little bit through the chest. And so laying over an object that requires the chest to open or the shoulders to relax can help kind of unwind some of that patterning. So I have here a pillow, and you could use a pillow like that if you had one at your house. Not very many people are going to have this really special yoga pillow, but you might have a blanket. And if you do, you can take your blanket and essentially just fold it up until you've got a lift, right? It doesn't have to be super high. It can be just a little bit will make your shoulders open up. And if you have a larger blanket, like a big quilt, you can roll that up and you'll get really close to this. So, or even a couch cushion, like the back of your couch might be useful, or a couple of throw pillows. You can figure it out. Anything that just elevates you a little bit and asks your chest to open up will work really nicely. And then we're gonna do the butterfly with the legs, which is where the knees go apart and the feet are together, so you get this nice little butterfly shape. And again, for some of us, this inner thigh area is quite sensitive. The groins might be really sensitive, even the hip socket itself. So putting something under the legs, like a folded blanket, or a little, if you have a couple of books, you can stick a book under each knee. If you've got yoga blocks, a block under each knee, so that you have a little bit of support and structure. So once you get into the pose, you want to pause, feel it. Oh. And then you'll make adjustments, like the pillow, you might want higher up your back or lower. If you're using something under your knees, you might want it closer to the thigh or further down near the ankle. So experiment a little bit with the props that you're using. So there's a little sensation of something happening right here in the shoulder. There's a little sensation of something happening here in the inner thigh. Something where you kind of feel like, yep, I can feel that. And then we pause. So first, find the pose. 2, pause, stay a while. 3, be present, breathe deep. You don't have to strain to breathe, but just allow the breath to be deep and smooth. We're going to stay for about 2 more minutes. So just check in with yourself and notice, right? This is the part where it's really interesting because you've stayed a while and maybe your mind already tripped off to other places. You just come on back. And notice, like, is the sensation in the shoulder area the same as it was when I got started? What about the hips? Do I want to make any changes there? And then come back to that nice smooth breath and a little bit of presence and some stillness. We're going to take 2 more breaths. Now, the last part of Yin Yoga is we come out slow. So you're going to bring your thighs together in some fashion. You can straighten the legs out or bring the knees together. And then with whatever you've put underneath your back, you're going to gently kind of roll yourself over and slip that stuff out. And then we're going to come back onto our back. Have the props that you were just using nearby so that you can use them again, potentially, in a moment. So for now, we're just going to notice the impact. So you might adjust your legs out long. You can put your feet on the ground if that's a little nicer. I like to do just a little bit of internal movement with my thighs, so a little windshield wipery action feels nice after all that time with the butterfly. And go slow and be kind to your little hip joints. And then notice the area like around your shoulders and your chest and your upper back. And usually for me, depending on what object I've had, there might be like more of a sense of something having been under my back, like a feeling of an impression or something like that. But always, no matter what it is that I've used, there's a little bit of softness or brightness that I feel kind of along the collarbone and armpit area, where I've released a little bit more. And my arm bone feels like it goes backwards. When I first laid down, it felt like it wanted to roll forward. So there's a little subtle change, but I think it's pretty nice. I like it. Hopefully you do as well. Now, I don't know if I'm going to stay on your screen for this whole thing. I'm not that tall, but I might be. So we're going to stretch out from fingertips to toe tips. And then you're just going to bend yourself sideways into sort of a crescent or a banana shape. So this is referred to as banana asana, banana pose. And you can just adjust the arms so that your shoulders are happy with you. They don't have to be overhead. You can adjust how much the inside curve is accepting by gently adjusting the shoulders. And then you can also add a little bit more. For some people this will add on. If you take my left side is the side that's longer, and my right side is this curled in side. So if I took my left ankle and cross it over my right ankle, and then I let this left hip get kind of heavy, it pulls a little bit more on that IT band edge of my thigh. Now, the IT band is a thick, dense connective tissue layer. It does not put up with a lot of bullying. It will fight you. So be kind there. But if that feels nice, that little tug on your hip, you can certainly add that little bit to it. And then for the shoulders, you can easily make the arms look more like a saguaro cactus and a little bit less over your head. And that might be nicer for the shoulder girdle. And you'll still get this kind of length, right? You can even take the inside arm all the way down and let just the outside arm be over. So this is a shorter pose. We're going to stay for about 2 more minutes. Adjust your head so that your neck feels like it's just kind of a continuation of this curve. And just in case, I don't know if you can see it, but both my hips are still touching the floor, both my shoulders are touching the floor, and the length of my spine is touching the floor. So I'm bent sideways, but I'm not laying on my side. So just in case that wasn't clear. One of the things about this pose that I think is most interesting is the way the lungs respond to the breath. So I feel the lung more on the left side because there's a sense of pressure there, but the right side lung, I can feel the breath drop deeper into the body because the diaphragm is able to move maybe. Maybe it's just the way the lung expands. It's just interesting to notice little kind of subtleties in how the pose impacts the rest of our experience. So we're going to take one more big breath here. And then we'll come out of the pose by kind of gently just realigning ourselves. And then once you're here, notice, like, what happened? So often, one side of my body feels longer. So my left leg feels a tiny bit longer than my right leg. I have a feeling if I measured them, they would be exactly the same length or pretty darn close. but it feels different. And it's what's important to understand about this is this contact that you're making right now, where you're feeling what sensations are coming back to my brain. Those neural pathways go through the fascia of the body. And it's the fascia that we're really after with Yin Yoga. We want to create a sense of movement, of hydration, of slipperiness in the connective tissue layer, the fascia that wraps around all of our muscle tissue, that lives under the skin and on top of the muscle, and that lives between the muscle and the bone. And then that same connective tissue becomes tendons and ligaments, and actually technically the bone itself. So we're putting just enough pressure on that system to get feedback, and then to also, that creates a sense where the tissue actually will hydrate itself. So that's why we're trying not to be aggressive. We want just enough sensation, and why we stay a while. And that loop, that neural pathway loop that's returning that information to your brain, is also going to tell you if you were on the right track or not. If it feels pleasant, for me, that says, let's keep going. And if, when you come out of a pose, there's like, oh, that's a little tender, or oh, that feels a little sore, you are being too aggressive, right on? And so it's a great way for us to learn from our own body how to practice yoga. You don't necessarily always have to be told everything. You can also learn for yourself, because your body will tell you stories, and it does not lie. What is it that Shakira says? Hips don't lie. Well, neither does anything else, y'all. So we're going to stretch out nice and long. We're going to bend ourselves the opposite direction. Now, if you need a little bit more time before you do the other side, take a little longer. And then we'll stay for a while. Again, you can make those little adjustments that make it just right for you. And then let yourself settle and breathe. Notice if maybe sometimes my nostrils switch which one is actually clearer when I'm holding one of these poses. One nostril will open up a little bit. There's a spider on my mat. Hold on. Over there, little spider. Go. Do positive things in the world. Just not on my mat. Sorry, back to the yoga. Now that I'm no longer being tortured by small arachnids. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, I'm sure it was really great. But anyway, just breathe, yogis. Notice the little details that are present here. We'll stay for about we're about halfway through. More breaths left. Oh, I was talking about the nostrils. So sometimes when I do this pose, the pose that's on the nostril that's on the longer side opens up more while I'm holding it. Just notice if that, is true. Like, did this nostril on your longer side clear up a little bit? That's what I was trying to share with you before the spider distracted me. So take one more big breath. whatever nostril is available, and then come on back to the center and pause for a moment and just notice if anything shifted or changed. And again, if you don't feel anything, don't worry about that. What we're doing when we pay attention is we're building the pathways that return information back to the brain. Any neural pathways that you don't use, they often sort of get a little thinner. There's not as many of those neural pathways, so it's a little bit more tricky to get that information. The more you pay attention, the more you reinforce those neural pathways, the more sensitive you'll become. So don't sweat it if you don't feel things right away. Over time, just work to develop that sensitivity. It's worth it. It's really interesting and cool. Oh, I think. This is where you get to discover Candy's thoughts about life. Okay, so what we're gonna do is like a half happy baby pose. And for some of us, having the pelvis on the floor is gonna be plenty of fun for one night. But some of us may want to elevate the hips a little bit. So you could take like your folded blanket, or you could take a yoga block, or whatever you've got. I don't know that people have telephone books anymore, but that would be an awesome yoga prop if you had a big yellow pages. I don't even think those exist anymore. But in any case, like you could put something underneath your hips that's about that high, an inch or two, just to elevate the hip. That will give you a little bit more release through the hip flexor on the other leg. So we're gonna do one leg in like a half happy baby, and then the other leg is gonna open up. Now, if you've got tight enough hip flexors, when you reach in here to get your foot, this leg is gonna lift like mine is right now, where the hip flexor kind of buckles, and then just letting that leg release is gonna be enough stretch right there. But for some of us, that's not gonna be enough. And also for this side, if you're holding onto the foot and it feels great, awesome. If that creates trouble, you can hold onto the ankle. You can wrap the arm just kind of round the thigh and hold like that. You can even hold with both hands if that's a little bit better. So you can create, or even wrap like a towel or a yoga strap around your leg to hold onto it that way. So you find a way to hold your leg in a way that's right for you. Now I'm gonna put this blanket underneath my hips so that there's just a tiny bit of lift. I find, especially for my left leg, that that's helpful. It gives me just a little bit more room for that leg to fall into space. And then on this side, the sensation is very much more like a lunge, like the hip, the knee, the thigh, all a little bit different. Glute. So this is all about my hip flexor. This is all about everything else. External hip rotator, adductor, all kinds of good stuff. And I'm using all kinds of fancy words, you know, just your butt. It's all about your butt. How's that? To get really, maybe a little bit crass. Or definitely more common. So, at least the words, the language. So we're letting this relax. We're letting this side relax as best you can. I like the way my arm has to reach for this little bit. It tractions my shoulder nicely, but if that's not really nice for you, you could easily put a little support underneath the shoulder as well. And again, this one isn't a super long pose, but we'll stay for a bit, a couple more minutes. It's also not the most attractive yoga pose, so I apologize for that. Remember, once you kind of get settled in and you feel like you've sort of figured out where all the little edges should be, where your hand should go, how far the leg should be up close to your armpit, that kind of jazz, you can come back home to checking in with the breath, checking in with what your brain is up to, kind of bringing yourself back to the present moment. And just keep coming back. The present moment can be, you know, if you're in a present moment where you're about to be eaten by a tiger, that would be a really uncomfortable present moment to be a part of. And you would have things on, your mind would do things appropriately, I'm sure, to either run or hide from that circumstance. But what sometimes happens when we're not faced with an immediate danger is that our brain still perceives danger or perceives stress, and then our body reacts as if we are in that kind of immediate danger. So the practice of mindfulness is really a practice of, in those times when there's not actually a danger, but our body is responding as if there is, can we use the breath and presence to relax and stay in the moment and not create for ourselves those little extra bits of stress. So we're going to take about 2 more breaths here. Now we're going to come out of this really gently. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my left leg in, because that hip flexor is pretty vulnerable. Then I'm going to let go of this guy, okay? And put this leg down nice and slow right beside the other one. And that gives me a chance to just pause. You can stretch your legs all the way out straight. You can do the little windshield wipers. I often, because this pose is actually pretty intense for my hips, I like to just pause for a couple breaths and then start some movement. And sometimes longer. Pausing feels better if I do it for longer. And then sometimes too, like if you've got something really firm underneath your hips, it's nice to just get a little bit of movement there, or even remove it for a short period of time, just so that it's not too tedious. All right, now for me, the right side is tighter, so I don't need the extra lift, so I'm going to take that guy out for now. I'm going to take my right leg out straight. Oh, I'm going to bring my left leg into the happy baby. And then we're going to adjust to whatever circumstances is right for you. So you might decide that you're going to elevate your hips or not elevate. You might decide you actually want support under this knee. Maybe the knee is a little bit vulnerable because this hip is so tight. If this happy baby situation isn't working, of course you can grab anywhere like I showed you earlier. So we're just gonna pause. You guys good? All right, so we're gonna take some deep breaths. Check in with what our mind is doing, check in with the breath. You can also be present for your surroundings. That's really lovely. Just kind of enjoying this gentle light if you've got gentle lighting in your house. Just noticing the kind of ebb and flow of your existence in this moment. Shy of another minute or so here. So we're going to take a nice deep breath. Let go with a big deep. Now we're going to slowly unwind. So again, I'm going to bring this leg in first, nice and gentle. Then I'm going to let go of this leg and let it gently find its home beside the other one. And then pause and just let yourself receive the feedback of whether that was a good yoga pose or a pose that's a little trickier for you. And you can make different choices if you ever decide to do it again, which you may or may not. And then kind of get a signal from your body when it's ready to start moving. So my body has a point where I feel it's almost the sensation of like easing your seat back in the car. There's a sense of just, there's a kind of dip or a relaxation response that then tells me, okay, now it's time to move. And it's not super dramatic, but there's just a little subtle shift that lets me know, yeah, we're good. Now, again, this may or may not occur for you. I think it will over time, but who knows? We're all a little different. Maybe I'm just a little weird. Now, we're gonna flip over onto our belly. If you wanna do some little cat-cows on all fours first, you can certainly do that. Start with a Sphinx, but before we get to that, again, you can do some little movement patterns, just kind of work yourself up to it. This isn't going to be a super long Sphinx. We're going to hold it for about 2 minutes, and then we're going to go into a slightly more intense back bend, at least intense for some of us, which is the one called either melting heart or heart chakra pose. So if when we get to that one, you realize, yeah, this is really not right for me, you can come back to your friend the Sphinx. Now, what I've done for the Sphinx that makes it a little bit better for me is I've positioned my elbow in front of my shoulder. If I position my elbow back behind my shoulder, then there's this kind of collapsing that happens around the neck. I don't find that really pleasant. So if I put my elbow slightly forward, then my shoulder blade, collarbone, and arm bone all kind of hold each other really nicely in this really nice place. I like my elbows just a tiny bit closer together than the actual distance of my shoulders. And that gives my body a really nice kind of tripod almost to position itself between my elbows and my pelvis, so that my neck can relax, the upper back is mostly relaxed. Now, for some of you, this is still going to be kind of intense. You can certainly take yourself down to the crocodile, just kind of rest your chin or your forehead on your crossed arms. If you want a little bit more, you can bring yourself to a seal where you kind of prop up on straighter arms. For me, I don't have a lot of lumbar room, so the seal and the Sphinx are basically the same, but for some of you, they'll be pretty different. Try to relax through the glutes and the legs if you can a little bit. The glutes are used to helping you do back bends. We're trying to sort of disengage that just a little bit. And you'll notice immediately if you're in the back bend too deep, because you'll start to feel the pressure when you let the glutes relax. Breaths. Now to do the heart chakra pose, what we're going to do is almost come back toward child's pose, but we're going to kind of keep the hips a little forward, over the knees or pretty close to that, rather than over the heels. So the hips are going to come back. I like my knees hips distance apart. And then I just slide my arms out until my chest touches the ground. I do forehead down. Some people do chin down. And this is quite intense across my shoulders. So if it's too intense, you can bend one elbow and hold it for one side. And then we'll, take 5 or 6 breaths and then switch and do the other side. Okay? We're letting the low back kind of sag a bit into the shape. but not too much. So just the right amount for you. I'm going to switch arms. So breaths here. Hopefully you guys can hear me when I'm talking into my armpits. Last one. Now to come out of this pose, we're going to sort of either go forward or go backward, whichever is the better option for you. Take all the pressure out of your shoulders. And you might want a child's pose. I know I do. So after I'm done kind of rinsing around my shoulder girdle, I'm going to go back to child's pose. And then after you've had a little bit of time there, we're going to wind up in a seated position. Once you come to a seated position, give yourself permission to kind of move around a little bit. Notice the sort of impact that the heart chakra pose is pretty intense. For me, anyway, it's pretty intense for me. I have a lot of tension. It's like all my stress I load right there in my upper back, and it's quite a spicy pose for that reason. Okay. So we're going to do either a square or shoelace, and that is kind of personally dependent on what your body wants to do. And then we'll turn that into a swan, or you can stay with the shoelace or the square pose if that's better for you than the swan. So when we get to that, you can either hold steady or go into the other pose. Now the shoelace is Gomukhasana by another name. So the knees stack on top of each other. Now, when I stack my knees, my hip is off the floor, so this one's not the right one for me because I can't get level, but it might be for you. So for me, the square pose is better because stacking the shins on top, so there's a square here, that I can do. My hips can be both on the floor. Now, my preference, because my ankle joint bites into my inner thigh right here, is to take a block and put that in front and rest the ankle joint on the block, or a pillow or a book, whatever you got. Tupperware container, whatever you got handy. You can also angle this further out. So if you put the block out in front, that might actually be a better shape for you than the shape closer in. So you can adjust using blocks or pillows or whatever you've got handy. You can kind of adjust the angles here. What we're going for is the legs fairly close together. So either, so inwardly, so adducted that the knees are crossed, or at least parallel. And I'm an external rotator. Like my legs want to go wide and they want to go out. That's a much more comfortable shape probably because that's how I've always liked to position myself. So it's become habitual. It's possible it's also genetic. I don't know. There might be a reason that from a time I was a tiny thing, I wanted to sit with my legs splayed out. So You might be the opposite of that, and it might be very comfortable bringing your knees in really tight. And then you can hinge forward, so you can bring the pelvis forward. You can leave yourself sitting straight upright. You can add a little bit of a twist to this. That's really pleasant. Actually, that's really pleasant. I'm going to hang with that. Or you can, modify it in some other way for you. As long as the legs are in this position, you can do lots of different things with your upper body. So we're going to stay with this guy for about 1 more minute. As a team, if that's the right word. And then I'll give you like personal options to go off in other directions. So you can stay right here, just whatever you're up to. Or you can take this top leg off the top and stretch it behind you to come into a swan pose. And you might know the swan better as the pigeon pose, similar shape, just a slightly different approach to the practice, right? It's a little softer approach, a little less, there's little fewer alignment rules, how's that, with the swan than the pigeon. But the rule always is that you want to feel something right at the edge of, oh, I feel that, not at the point where you can't stand it anymore. The point where you can't stand it anymore is farther over the edge. It's like off the edge of the cliff and you're falling. So if this pose pushes you in that direction, back off and go for the other pose. This might be the exact right pose for you tonight, comparatively speaking. For some people, the shoelace or square pose is more intense than the swan. And we're going to stay with this guy for about 1 more minute here. Take 2 more breaths, yogis. Let yourself kind of gently release the shape that you're in. Now, if you are doing the square pose or the shoelace still, the leg that's on top is going to wind up as your straight leg, and if you're doing the swan, the leg that's in the back is going to be your straight leg. Okay? So eventually we're going to come to this half butterfly shape, but first you may want to do a little bit of a rinse. Like you're ready, you can come into this little half butterfly. Now, one thing, just a thought, is often for many of us, the prospect of folding forward is quite tricky. So taking your blanket that you had, if you had one, hope you do, it's useful, they're useful. Grab a blanket or a pillow and just sit on the edge of it so it sort of lifts you up and pushes your hips forward, and then this forward bend is a little bit easier. You can build yourself a bunch of little yoga props to act as armrests, or you can even build, if you've got some couch cushions or a stack of throw pillows or some yoga blocks and pillows, you can build kind of like a little Stonehenge to let yourself relax into. If you don't have any of that, but your leg will fit under the couch, you can slide your leg under the couch and lean into, put your elbows up on the edge of your couch and lean into the couch. So you can be really creative with the furniture you've got nearby to allow for some structure and support. We're going to stay with for a little while, so we've got a few more minutes here. But I love, with any forward bending shape, I love to feel the breath in the lower back. Because the place where the breath normally is allowed to expand, the belly area, is a little bit compressed, the lower back kind of allows itself to expand, and it feels really interesting and lovely. Now, if you have any sort of issues with your lower back, like some sciatica, or you have herniated disc, and this exacerbates that for you, clearly back off a little bit. You can sit upright. You could even do a twist again if that feels really nice, so that you don't have that problem. Don't forget to bring yourself back to your breath. If your mind is wandering about, catch it going down those old familiar pathways. Inside of the last minute here, you guys. Take 2 more really big breaths. Hold in that last one, come all the way up. Whew. And we're gonna lean back a little bit and undo all of this crazy nonsense we've been doing. And just pause for a moment. we're going to do the other side, starting with the shoelace or the square pose. Now again, if you're not ready to do the other side yet, give yourself another little bit of time. If you are ready, you can bring the opposite leg up on top. And if you're not sure what the opposite leg is, try one and see if it feels familiar. Hopefully you'll remember which the opposite side is. And again, once you're in the position with your legs in whatever position is appropriate for this, you can fold forward, you can lean back a little bit, you can do a little bit of a twist, you can even do, like wrap your arms behind your back, something along that line, so you get a little different angle is probably the wrong word, but like just a slightly different variation. How's that on theme of the pose? You're back, are you? Go that way. I don't know if it's the same spider or different spider, but this happens a lot when it rains. All of the creepy crawlies, let's go indoors. I try to make room for them, y'all. It's tricky though. So we're going to stay with this guy for about another minute, and then we'll switch it, or maybe we'll last a little longer than that. Okay, yogis, so you can either take this guy, unwind that top leg and slide yourself into your swan, or stay with your shoelace and or square pose. Notice, because if the choice you made was a little too spicy, then it might be a good idea to back off a little bit. And if the choice you made is just right, then you can stay with it or add on a little bit. Inside of that last minute, just a wee bit longer. 2 more big breaths. With the second exhale, let yourself gently release your pose. Again, we're going to come around for the half butterfly, but not necessarily right away. You could move a little bit first. And then we'll get to that half butterfly moment when it's time, when the time is right. Alrighty, yogis. So again, you might decide that it would be a good idea to sit up on the edge of a blanket or roll the blanket under a knee to create a little structure that you can fold yourself in toward. Maybe you sit upright because folding forward is not really a good idea for you. That's okay too. Some people can fold so far forward, so gently and so easily that they just melt into their thigh. But many of us will find that there's a point somewhere between directly sitting upright and melting into the thigh that is the right spot, right? Just the right amount of forward movement to feel a little bit of sensation in the back of your thigh and in your glute and up your back. Mark yogis. It's a good time to check in with yourself and just see how things are going. Come back home to the breath if that's helpful. Bring your brain back to the present moment if you were daydreaming about pumpkin spice lattes, that sort of thing. Side of our last minute with this pose. breath. Let go with a big deep sigh. And inhale your way up. We're going to lean back. We're going to undo the legs. You can make movements when you're ready. Now, the remainder of our practice is going to take place on our back. What we're going to do is a reclining twist. We're going to hold that for a few minutes on each side. And then we're going to do a final pose. And that pose could be either Shavasana, which is where you just lay on your back, or you can do legs up the wall or some equivalent. So if you don't have a wall nearby, like I don't really have an empty wall. I got lots of stuff. So, but what I could do is put my legs up over the couch, or I could put my legs up, up this credenza behind me, something like that. If you got a chair nearby, you can kind of bring the chair over and put your legs up on the seat of the chair so that your back lays on the floor, and then you just throw your legs up and over whatever object or surface is appropriate around you. You can even do that with a bunch of pillows, like stack up all the couch cushions, put your legs up on the couch cushions. It works really great. So that's a possibility for your final pose. So that may mean that you want to go ahead, like if you do have a wall surface or you have a couch and you want to move your mat over there now so that you're ready to go, you can do that first and then lay down and do the twist. And then you'll be in position for that final pose in a little bit better way. So I'm gonna make sure that I have a blanket and a pillow close by, because I like to use those sometimes for these poses. So once you've figured things out, you've gotten yourself where you want to be, you're going to come back onto your back, which might feel kind of abrupt after that forward bending shape. This might feel kind of weird. So you can give yourself a little movement, a little windshield wipers, a little happy baby, whatever seems right. And then we're going to bring the legs over to one side. So I'm going to take my legs to the left first because my right shoulder is tighter, and I'm going to stretch that side first. You can choose either way. So I like to take the pillow and either put it on the bottom so I can kind of let my legs drape over it, or I'll put it in between my two knees. So the bottom leg is on the floor and then the top leg kind of drapes over. So whichever one feels better. Today it feels better to do the bottom. So you can do that with a pile of blankets. You can put a blanket under your head. You can put a blanket under your shoulder. And as I let the legs kind of drape this direction, I get a little bit more of sensation in my chest muscle here. So chest, the big pectoralis major muscle, connects the breastbone, the rib cage, and the arm bone together. Its little companion, the pectoralis minor muscle, which is actually a secondary breathing muscle and a shoulder stabilizer, that connects the rib cage closer to the armpit, actually through the arm joint and to the shoulder blade. So the shoulder blade is connected to the ribs through the, in the front, through this pec minor, and then the arm bone is connected to the ribs in the front through pec major. So you might feel one or the other of that. It might be the whole area, or it might be focused a little bit more towards your armpit. But in either case, be gentle. It's a big area, a lot of connective tissue living in the rib cage and connecting things to the ribs. So we want to be kind and just let that happen over time. So you might need to bend at the elbow or change the position of your arm, or put more support under your legs. Okay. So we've been here for a little while. We're going to stay for about another 2 minutes, and then we'll switch sides. I often find it's helpful too to kind of change my head position from straight up, or maybe move it to the side. Some people may even want to look in the direction of the arm that they're kind of letting release. 2 more big breaths here. We're going to come out nice and slow. So the leg that's on top, start with bringing just that guy back toward the other side, and then just let the rest of the body follow it. You can take that arm and move that around a little bit. You can move the legs around a little bit, and then when it feels like things have shifted, and my spine wants to stay over in that twist, but in about 3 more breaths, maybe 4, it'll feel a little bit less inclined towards that. Right? I'll feel it kind of shift. So the fluid in the spine shifts back where it belongs, when we're in neutral anyway. And then, when you feel that sort of sense that you're no longer inclined to go that way, more so than this way, then you could go ahead and shift yourself over to the opposite side. And again, adjust, put pillows under, adjust as you like. And let ourselves settle in for a few minutes. Here. Take a big breath, and again, just kind of leading with that top leg. Come on back, and this is where you're going to slip into whatever your final relaxation pose is going to be. Whether you're going to put your legs up on your couch, or you're going to slide into a shavasana with some pillows and blankets, or without. point of the last pose is really so that there's no pressure or very little pressure on the body. We really want to be as relaxed as possible. So we can just allow the nervous system to kind of integrate all of this information. Everything to hydrate nicely. Take a moment just to notice the breath again, yogis. Take a nice deep breath all the way down to your tiptoes. Let it go with a big and then you can start to wiggle fingers and toes and wrist and ankles. Eventually, unless you want to stay a while, bring yourself to a seated position. thank you so much for joining me for a little yin yoga. Hopefully it was beneficial to you. Let's take a big breath together, yogis. Nice big inhale. Big deep sigh. Namaste. Enjoy your night.